So let's move on to another author, Rider Haggard, H. Rider Haggard, I believe, if that's correct.
Mhm.
So he's the author most famously of The Mines of Solomon. Am I getting that
King
right?
Solomon's Mines.
Sorry, yes, King Solomon's Mines. You can tell I haven't read these, and She, the other most famous book by Haggard. Tolkien was an avid reader of this guy, and there's a number of really interesting influences you discuss. But can we talk about She? What was She about?
Well, the title of She comes from She Who Must Be Obeyed, who is this sort of goddess figure, this immortal or at least long-lived woman in a South African kingdom, who by a very convoluted sort of sequence of plot events has murdered her lover, or rather murdered the man that she wanted to be her lover because he wouldn't be her lover. And the characters that we meet in the present day, one of them is the reincarnation of this fellow, and he finds the relics basically that have been handed down of this fellow, one of which is the sherd of Aminardus, which has an inscription which gives the story of all of these events. And so he wants to go back and investigate, and they meet She Who Must Be Obeyed. Adventures ensue. So it's a kind of definitely a sort of supernatural adventure, because we've got this apparently immortal woman, and we have reincarnation. It's a very kind of strange story. One of the things that really caught my eye in looking at this book and also King Solomon's Mines, particularly She, is the way that Haggard uses artifacts. This sherd of Aminardus, this piece of pottery that has the story inscribed on it. It's really the thing that kicks off the plot. And he went to great lengths to make a realistic actual potsherd. It's so realistic that apparently it fooled some people into thinking that it was an actual ancient artifact. This is reproduced as a frontispiece in She. In the early editions, it's in color. It's very realistically done. It's intended to be to be kind of metatextually convincing that it really existed, it really happened. And there's a lot of similarity between this and what Tolkien does with the Book of Mazarbul, because that's mentioned in the Lord of the Rings. It's the book that recounts what happens to Balin when in Moria, and the Fellowship find this book and they look through the pages. Well, Tolkien originally wanted to have some pages from that book included as images, and he went to great lengths to produce these artifacts, pieces of paper that he wrote on, but then he also punctured the edges as if they were sewn in a book. He burned the edges so that they looked realistically damaged by fire. Went to great lengths to produce this artifact. It's very similar kind of in technique to what Haggard did with the shard. And I think that there's a very good case to be made that Haggard gave Tolkien some ideas about how this could work and how these artifacts could be used to enhance the kind of believability of the story. And he does this with maps as well, between King Solomon's Mines and the maps that we have with Thorin and company in The Hobbit.
Yeah, and those pages from the Book of Mazarbul have now been added. They were unable to be published at the time, but in at least in the box set from HarperCollins, I want to say from starting in 2014 or 2015, they've added those sort of fake facsimiles or whatever they are, and that it's really nice to have those finally. Are there any plot elements from She that may have influenced Tolkien?
Um, Probably not. And one of the things that I found in this research was that very seldom was Tolkien inspired by plot that he got from his sources. Sometimes there's a little bit. For instance, we know that he adapted a scene from S.R. Crockett's adventure story, The Black Douglas, for The Hobbit. We know this because he says so. He identifies the scene. And I talk about that in the book. But for the most part, what I observed that Tolkien does is he picks up smaller elements like names or images, characters, and then he transforms them. I think it's because he has such a transformative imagination that plot gets digested and broken apart, and we don't, I think, really see much of that in terms of influence when we look at how he engages with his literary sources.